Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about doing more plumbing and more electrics and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. Alright, let's start pushing on with a bit more of the plumbing for the raw water cooling system. But first, I have to say, happy St. Patrick's Day, and a big thank you to Keith who sent me the shirt to help commemorate, so to your good health.
I've decided to go with the original copper pipe because I do believe it's a long stretch to run from a point of view of vibration, which people mentioned, and also as the heat exchanger blocks up, there'll be more and more pressure in here. Obviously you service it regularly, but there is the chance that this will cop a lot of pressure and start to swell or whatever, so let's leave it as it was. The other thing I find is if something was a certain way for probably 30 years, the age of the boat, why change it? It's definitely a squeeze getting in here now with the cooling pipe in. Before, when we had the wet exhaust coming through, it was impossible, so there's that. Alright, what I want to do now, I've got my new hose clamps, is attach this hose to here. The angle between the jab scope pump and the sea strainer is kind of a bit this way, so I'm going to rotate it. A viewer also commented about rotating it just to keep the pipe out of this space more. So by rotating it, I'm making a little bit more space, and I'm also having it meet at a more natural angle, so that's good, less tension on it. That there looks good. That way it's just pointing straight to it. Don't forget we've still got the blower silencer to come on here as well, so we're going to make sure we leave room for that. Alright, we've now got these oil hoses that come from the gearbox to the gearbox oil cooler, and I'm thinking I'm going to sort of strap all this together. I don't want to put too much strain on this fitting. Maybe it needs support from above or something as well, just to stop it all, you know, potentially breaking, cracking. But it's all things I can just keep tweaking once it's actually working. Alright, this is the hose that comes from the coolant header tank. We've got a recovery cap in there, so we put our little puke tank down here. It's almost worth putting this entire hose on. I was going to cut it. That's actually a nice gentle curve, so I might leave that there. I'll just get another little bit for the overflow. When you use cable ties and hose clamp, there's special types that have a curve back to them, like this one, see? Yep. While we're down here, you can see it wouldn't take much at all. I don't know if that's just a press fit, I'll find out. But it wouldn't take much at all to have this come out further and actually up higher. So I might use this, but literally just extend it. Alright, done. Oh. I'm glad I don't like Detroit diesels that much, otherwise I'd never get out of here. I'm just soaking some fiberglass exhaust wrap in fresh water so I can install that on the first part of the exhaust, which will allow me to then put the missing coolant hose on. I think my visitor thinks I'm fishing and I've got to have some frames to give him. Even if I was fishing, I wouldn't catch anything, so disappointment all round. Alright, I think this has been soaking long enough. Squeeze some of the air out of it maybe. For those of you who've been watching for a while, you'll remember that this bit of exhaust was painted with the ultra high temperature paint, so that should help with any corrosion underneath the tape, which can be an issue. Alright, hinge clamps, ratchet, remember this time. Oh, and people were asking about double clamping. And traditionally, yes, I think for survey you're supposed to have everything, you know, to do with the raw water below the waterline double clamped. These clamps are a lot, like, you know, significantly better than your average sort of worm drive clamp. They're also wider, so often you can't fit two. But I would trust one of these before I'd trust two worm drive clamps anyway, so that's the way I'm going. Of course, I brought the wrong size socket. Looks like these are 8s and I brought a 10. Back up. But while we're here, let's have a look. It's on. Yeah, see, if I put that onto there, it gives us quite a nice curve, and we've got plenty of length. So I say we actually get the angle grinder and cut this off. Otherwise, we're still kind of doing this and bringing it close to the exhaust. So let's just come right out here. No kinks and no proximity to the exhaust. Let's go about here, I reckon. I'm going to install the flow meter in the right direction, hopefully. So there is a big arrow saying flow this way. Okay, and then the wires we'll send to the junction box, which is actually sending it aft to start with, but then it comes forward from there. Right. Final step now is a reducer again and a bit of hose down to our seacock that also needs a tail on it. Alright, this is our junction block from the wheelhouse, so I'll quickly get a photo of this, just get the order of the colours. I'll do the junction block at the wheelhouse in the same order just to reduce mistakes. Yes, we've got the colours, but I think it'll make it easier. This is the terminal block I'm going to be using. I've only got ring terminals, not the kind of fork terminals, so I'll have to take the screws right out and pop those in. So I'll do all those first. This is our oil pressure sender. I'm just going to cut a little bit of the conduit off here just so we can separate them a little bit more. Now, this panel I've put in the dash is for switches, and these are the switches that go in it. This particular one's a 12 volt one, so this is the one I'm going to use to activate all the gauges. Alright, this is the feed I'm sending up to the switch that's going to activate the gauges. I haven't done my homework, I'll be honest, but let's just call it a 3 amp fuse. They're not going to draw much. I'll add the total up later on, but that'll do for now. Alright, then we need a spade connector to go on the back of this switch. So we'll cut this, crimp a spade connector on. Alright. These switches just push into this housing, like so. I'm going to put the switch at this end because, you know, it's closest to the dial, so to me it makes sense. This end is gauges. I'll label them, but I like there to be some logical order to it all. I'll group and sort of neaten this stuff as I go. The important thing at this point really is making sure that you don't have things fed through loops and you can't get them back out to neaten it. Alright. Negative attach. I need to shrink down all this heat shrink, but it's really awkward with the little gas torch. I'm actually going to wait until I've got my heat gun and just do them all. Hour meter, 0 hours. So if we switch this off, okay, so that's power off. Don't think we're going to get a lot of indicator. Oh yeah, bit of a test there. Oh yeah, same. Interesting. So both the
tacho and the water temperature gauge run through a test. I don't know whether the oil pressure doesn't, same brand, both SAS, so let me just check it's got power. Yeah, looks like it does, okay. Alright, maybe it just doesn't do it, don't know. Anyway. And these switches I bought have the little LEDs, so you know if they're on or off as well. So we'll leave that off for now. I'm sparing you guys all the gory details here because, you know, it's hardly fascinating, all this wiring. But what I've done here is run another wire, which I will now put another fuse in. Unfortunately, the remaining stickers aren't very appropriate, so I'll figure something out for here. But what that is now is a second switch, which is going to be firmware validated. Oh right, I unplugged that, that's why. This switch, if it works, yes, is illumination. So we can have the switches on, like this, lights on or lights off. That power switch isn't just going to be a power switch for the gauges. I think I'll consider that kind of like an ignition switch. Obviously when it's on, things like the hour meter start running, so I'll also connect things like my flow meter to it, so when you put it on, the flow meter will start alarming, start the engine. Once the engine's running, the alarm should go off. That way you get a test of the alarm, as well as not having it going off constantly when the engine's switched off. All the sensor wires now come to this terminal block, which then has the multi-core going to the engine bay. So I've got my tacho, oil pressure and coolant temperature sensor sender wires heading back on the green, white and brown wires in the main multi-core loom. These three here are combined, so there's an LED ring and a buzzer in the center, and this is going to be my 3 bilge alarms for the cabin, engine bay and lazarette. These alarms just go to simple float switches essentially. I may use this, where is it? I think I might actually have 3 of these lying around, which are the field effect sensors. So it's a bit like similar technology to, say, the touchscreen in your phone, so no moving parts. But I can put one of these in each space just above the bilge pumps. So if ever water gets to here, we set off an alarm because we've got a problem. Next up, I decided to install a touchscreen computer that I was given for the boat by Ben, the same viewer who also gave me those labels for the electrics. The idea here is that I'm going to use it for a few things. One of the main reasons this screen is going to be really useful is it's going to enable me to do things like pop up Google Maps, show you where we are in the world when we're looking at a particular wreck, see photos of it, all that kind of stuff as a bit of a display board. It'll also be great in that I can get a completely independent USB GPS receiver and have a little bit of a backup navigation system as well. Alright, well let's get in and I'll show you where I'm going to put that. What I've bought here is a VESA mount, wall mount. These had mounts for clamping onto a desk, but I don't really have any way to do it in that context. So it turns out the mounting pattern for these types of screens is a standard. Awesome. So got a cheap mount, you know, it was nice and affordable, which is great. What I'm going to do is put it on here. The screen is just less than the width here. Perfect again. So we'll get this on, get it mounted, and I think it'll be a really good sort of touchscreen display we can have in the wheelhouse, and you know, research destinations we're going to, wrecks, show maps, all that kind of stuff. We've got the Raymarine for our actual position, all that kind of thing, although it'd be nice to actually put a secondary GPS into the computer as well. But for now, let's get it mounted and, you know, we'll tap its potential as time goes by. This rack's been quite handy. You seriously can't have enough storage on a boat, particularly one this small. So, quite fine head flatheads. So I'm going to get this off and probably just move it up a bit higher. Alright, I'm not going to rip that off the wall and damage the wall because it's clearly glued on as well, until I've seen how much height I need. Actually, you know, even if it damages the wall, I would probably put the screen up high. It's actually a good height to touch screen to view it, so maybe I should just knock it off. Who does that? 4 screws is enough. Alright, what I think I'll do is mount the screen actually quite high. Cover this section. Alright. Somewhat predictably, and in line with everything takes so much longer than you think, this bracket is about 1 millimetre too big to fit in here. The bolt pattern's right, the bolt patterns are standard, but the plastic here is too tight for this to go in, which means grinding the metal off. In case you're wondering, no, my mooring hasn't dragged downstream. Kevin's houseboat's been moved upstream a little bit. Rosie's been moved inshore a little bit. This all happened during their last mooring services. Rosie we fondly refer to as the Olympic torch because it never goes out. While that spray paint on the bracket dries, I'm just going to put some top coat on all the primer we did last week. And then that should be dry, and then we'll go and install the screen. The trick with mounting the screen is that I want it to be as high as possible, but really this doesn't come in until a certain height and it needs to drop down. So I need to figure out how high I can get this, still have the top of the screen clear here and drop in. So I think it's going to be lower than I'd like it, unfortunately, but is what it is. Top of the bracket to top of the screen is 180 millimeters. So it looks like here's about the highest we can get this bracket. And still get the screen in and slot it down. So I'll just divide the distance. What have we got? 570, which is 250, 35, 285. So 285, bit of a checksum, 285. The other half of the bracket now screws into the back of the screen, but it's going to hit the bracket, so we can't use the screws we've got, so we're going to have to find some others, and that'll happen next week. So our St. Patrick's Day special is visited by Murphy once more, and the screws I've got just don't fit properly. So I'm going to have to get them. I think they're 4mm metric, I believe, is the ones that go in there. So that's what I'm going to need to find just to get that bracket on the screen. Then we should be able to drop it in. So thank you, Ben, for providing that. It's going to be really, really useful, and we're close to getting it up. Anyway, that happens. So next up, I pushed on with the stop solenoid. Got the shut-off solenoid positioned pretty well now. So I'm going to mark these holes, and we'll drill the plate. I pretty much got it spot on the first time I designed this. These extra holes are just me trying to take a bit of weight out of the bracket. Alright, so, that's moving pretty well. So I'm going to tighten the other bolts up. If there's any misalignment, shades of the prop shaft, it binds up pretty severely. Alright, next step, wire up the solenoid to the stop button. Because I've painted over this, I'm just going to put some wires on. This is the negative side of the solenoid. Okay, let's get an earth to this solenoid. Phone just rang then, and it was Gary from, I think I said Hornsby before. It's actually North Shore Performance Mufflers in Hornsby, and saying all the exhaust parts have arrived, which is great. So I'm going to pick them up on Monday, so it's kind of nice to know they're there and we'll be able to push on with that. Unfortunately, there's been a frustrating delay in the arrival, actually even the shipping. They haven't even left the warehouse yet, of the bits I need to finish the raw water cooling side. You know, it is what it is. like all projects, people often say, oh, why don't you finish one thing before you start another? And the reality is, that's just how projects go. If you had a Gantt chart and said, right, I've started this bit, I'm not going to do anything else until that bit's finished, it would take 10 years. You know, you just have this Gantt chart that goes in a straight line and it'd be ridiculous. You know, the idea is you figure out what you can do while you're waiting for parts. And what I can do is what I'm doing now. You know, now I think about it, actually what's a part of that one shipment is actually the last bits I need for the raw water and the new dual high flow fuel filters. I figured there was no point sorting out that fuel supply problem when all I'm going to do is replace the fuel filters and, you know, the primary fuel filters anyway, and obviously re-bleed from scratch. So there was, you know, no point chasing that little niggle down. What I will show you though, sorry, getting distracted, but I'll show you what I think of it. This is the main line from the fuel tank. Even this is borderline actually too thin. Then it comes up to an even thinner size. So my plan is to cut it here. I think this is probably below the level of fuel we have in the tank currently, which is lucky, because what I need to do is cut this hose and attach a barb. I'm actually going to go to a soft line from this point onwards. But it means brazing a barb fitting onto this fuel line whilst there's diesel probably, you know, sitting literally about here. So any thoughts, feelings, concerns, experiences, tips, advice, whatever, about doing that safely are greatly appreciated. But, you know, look, I know it's flammable, but it's not going to explode. It's diesel, it's not petrol, you know. My plan literally is to try and cut it around here with a pipe cutter, put the fitting on, braze it on. I know you can get some of those AN fittings that I could kind of clamp on, which would be nice and safe and easy to do, but I was really struggling. I was talking to the guys and there's unfortunately not an adapter from this size to the size I need, which is a 3/8 barb. This is, I think, a 1/2 inch external diameter pipe, and then I need to go to a 3/8 barb, and they didn't have any sequence of adapters that would give me that. So that's something we're going to be up against next week anyway, so I figure I'd rather hear any thoughts now than later when you're watching me blow myself up. Alright, I'm going to do the solenoid earth just to the earth of the starter. Heaps of stud length left, so no dramas adding it on. This is actually where the starter solenoid gets its ground from, and while I'm here, from memory, this wasn't the right terminal lug. Yeah, I'd cut it open just so I could do some testing. Instead of being lazy, I'm going to cut it off and put a brand new 12mm terminal, so we've got the most reliable connection we can get. Alright, from an electrical point of view, we can start and we can stop the engine. I also have a cutting plan for an emergency stop, but I'll share that with you when I get around to doing it. Next thing I'm going to do is replace this hose with a proper 90-degree hose. This is a hose that Ken from Las Vegas sent me. Ken does motor racing and Three Dogs Racing is his team, so he really recommends these. He uses them on his race car, and I figure, well, if it's good enough for the race team, it's good enough for Renko. I'm going to need all of one side and then to cut another to here. Hopefully these are up to that size, looks like they are. I've got to say, these things do a great job. If you cut lots of hoses like this, I can't recommend them enough. Ken sent these hose clamps, which are a different style that I've never seen before. I've been using the T-bar stuff for the raw water, which is more critical, but what I like about these is you've got the outside section that's serrated for the worm drive, but then it actually spirals on the inside again with smooth metal, so that it doesn't sort of cut into the hose as much. So they're interesting. There we go, much better. Thank you, Ken and Three Dogs Racing. Next thing I'm going to do is put the adapter in here for the coolant temperature sender. The one I'm going to install is one that a viewer called Victor Bitter, after the famous beer, has sent me. You can see the coolant comes right up to the top,
And this one's been machined around it so the coolant can come right round the tip of the sender. One of the great things about this particular thread sealant is it actually doesn't matter if the thread's already a bit wet like that. Whether it's oilant or coolant, it'll still seal when it goes in. It doesn't have to be clean and dry, which is nice. That's as far as I got this week. Got a lot of little jobs done, which was nice, but we're still waiting on those exhaust parts, which have arrived, which is great, and then those cooling water and the fuel filter parts that we need before we can go on our maiden voyage. One of the days this week as well, I spent heading off shopping for various bits and pieces. Unfortunately, I couldn't buy the bits I needed. They're not available in store. They're a little bit more, obscure, so I had to order them. But what I did pick up was some marine carpet. So I'm sort of just slowly getting around to, I'm going to recarpet the wheelhouse, but what I want to do is start getting the cabin below ready so that you can sleep down there. And at the moment, the floor's lifted up so I can get down and grind the bilge. But then before I put the floor on, I want to recarpet it here so I can put that in with new carpet already on it, etc, etc. So this is all the stuff coming up. All right, well, take care and I'll catch you soon. See ya.
All right, let's go check on Daffy. She's gone broody at the moment. I'm happy to leave her there though, because of her leg. Gives her a chance to stay off it for a while. She makes this quite cute cooing noise when I interrupt her on the nest. Ain't ya? I don't know if it's outrage or not, but I do have some food for you, Daffy. Breakfast in bed. Look at this, worms for you. How spoiled are you? Go on. You may as well eat them all. It's alright, you look suspicious. Come on. Oh. About over there. Got them all? I think you have. Alright. Go back to being broody. Oops, sorry. Oops. Oops-a-daisy. Oh well, you can clean that later. Alright, chill out.
You can stop chickens being broody by cooling them down. Their body temperature raises when they want to go incubate eggs. But I'm just going to let her be. She needs the rest.